Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about our IDP My Guys for the 2024 fantasy football season.
Hike!
Joe, it's hard to believe, but we are back. It's going to be opening day here today. And we're going to be, before we get to the games, we're going to be talking about some IDP My Guys. So who's your first one?
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for the fantasy football season to kick off here, and I'm going to talk about a guy that you can go ahead and watch on this kickoff game on Thursday night, and that's going to be linebacker Trenton Simpson. And I think after watching the preseason games, he's a guy that's ready to be that starter alongside of Roquan Smith for this Baltimore Ravens defense. And Patrick Queen has left. He's in Pittsburgh Steelers now. And leaving behind, I mean, talking about Patrick Queen, who, when Trenton Simpson was first drafted, we thought this was instantly, this guy could overtake Patrick Queen. But Patrick Queen ended up having a really good year last year, 103 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 84 tackles solo. So that's kind of the production that's left behind with Queen going on to the Steelers. So playing next to Roquan Smith definitely has its benefits. And after watching some of the preseason games, it looks like Trenton Simpson's, ready to step into that role after being a special teams player mostly last year. It seems like he's been able to get the reps in training camp preseason and looks like he's ready to roll.
Especially when it comes to linebackers, and I think honestly over any other position, other than maybe corner, but it's kind of an odd one in the IDP world. I feel like LBs, I don't know why I'm calling LBs, linebackers, are opportunists. I feel they're opportunists, right? You got guys like Robert Spillane last year. Guys like this guy's a nobody, right? He's an opportunist. He became a starter in Las Vegas, and what do you know? He ended up doing really well. So as far as how good of a player Trenton Simpson will become, we don't know. But the opportunity is a juicy one. So, I mean, as long as he's somewhat competent, he should just step right in and have similar production.
And it definitely looks like, even though he's going to be a first-time starter, looks like he's ready to, be primed for a breakout season this year.
So my guy, I'm going to be talking about a linebacker as well. Linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. So he's a guy that you and I have talked about in the past. A guy I was extremely excited about originally with the San Francisco 49ers. When there were some injuries that took place, he became a would-be starter in the 21 to 22 season. Ended up playing really well and having 102 tackles, 2 sacks. Anyways, long story short, he goes to Tennessee. And although he didn't play, his stats was really good. Some would say maybe, he didn't play the greatest. I ended up not even ranking him in my top 24. It was a big mistake, even though he had 163 tackles. Now he reunites with DeMeco Ryans. He was the former defensive coordinator back in San Francisco, now obviously head coach of the Houston Texans. He's now going to be the linebacker to have, in my opinion, in that defense. He's going to be wearing the green dot. We know what that means. That means he's going to be that leader of the defense. And Christian Harris, a guy who people are really excited about, he's on the IR. So I believe that Azeez Al-Shaair will be the guy in this defense. And we've already seen what he was able to do last year. I thought that was the ceiling. I think he could do even better this year.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, he, like you mentioned, he's on a much better defense this year with the Texans and gets to play with DeMeco Ryans, in Houston as well, who we've seen being able to, his defense, especially at the linebacker position, I feel like does really well. And I think he should get plenty of tackles and, continue to be the linebacker that we were excited for last year as well.
Well, the other thing is I think money talks too, right? I mean, he received a pretty substantive contract from the Houston Texans. I think you and I were both surprised. He signed a prove-it deal with the Tennessee Titans.
Right.
I was not expecting him to sign for that much in Houston, which goes to show coach knows him, coach wants him, and he wants him to be a part of his defense. And that's where the money talks.
Absolutely, man. We talk a lot about just the connections and the inner workings of it's all about who you know. And just another example here, DeMeco Ryan's familiarity with Azeez Al-Shaair, put the faith in him to give him the money and bring him on the team here.
he will become more of a household name this year. I truly believe. I mean, the Texans, now with C.J. Stroud and what D'Amico Ryans did last year, Texans are going to be, a lot more eyeballs are going to be on them, and as a result, I think people are going to be talking more and more about this guy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he kind of, despite having a good year, I think he flew under the radar just because the Tennessee Titans weren't the best team last year.
No, they were not in a good place with Mike Vrabel. Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So, Joe, who is your second IDP My Guy?
Yeah, second guy I'm going to go with is Zach Allen of the Denver Broncos. And, from everything with training camp and the preseason, the reports are he's really just, taking that next step. And it just seems like the defense as a whole is taking a next step with Vance Joseph in his second year with the Broncos. And I know, Zach Allen's had the familiar Vance Joseph even with the Arizona Cardinals, but Vance Joseph, for whatever reason, was trying to bridge the gap between his defense and, Evero's to start last year, but then kind of evolved back to, his own defense. And I think just that continuity there, players are playing more confident. And I think the added depth to the Broncos defensive line overall will also help Zach Allen. I mean, honestly, it was just basically him and DJ Jones last year. And despite that, I mean, he still had a pretty good year. I mean, 60 tackles, did get 5 sacks, which I like to see from the interior position. But I think he's even got the ability to build upon that and push, maybe he gets 7 or 8 sacks this year. Just from everything we've seen, he's playing faster and honestly just more dominant, really pushing the offensive linemen around.
Yeah, I mean, after that torching that I believe the Broncos had against the Dolphins,
Yeah.
people had kind of thought and speculated, okay, is Vance Joseph on the way out here? But he turned it around. Defense looked so much better. Closed out on a high note, I believe. So now he's actually running the defense that he wants to run. I think is what it sounds like. You would know better than me as a Broncos insider over there. But I think overall, Zach Allen is the most out of that defense. I would imagine he's probably the most familiar with those play concepts that Vance Joseph wants to run. So I could definitely see Zach Allen. He's an under the radar name. People don't talk about him a lot. We view him as an interior player. That's why we have him as a defensive tackle. I think he'll do quite well.
Yeah, I think he will as well. And I think he's still a young player and everyone is compared him to a JJ Watt light. And I think we're starting to see that start to evolve here this year, I think.
All right, so my second IDP, my guy, I'll stick with the D line as well. We have him as an interior defensive line because he's not really playing on the outside, and that's Keion White of the New England Patriots. He's a guy over time during this offseason, I've grown more and more to liking him. He's just been an absolute beast in training camp. When you hear Gerard Mayo talk about him, I think they really view him as a leader. They really view him as a player that's going to take this next step in this defense, and they're going to need him. Christian Barmore, coming with the blood clots, he's probably not going to play the entire year. I think they're going to need him in that inside. My only concern is, does he have a lot of help around him? I mean, you have a guy like Anthony Jennings. He has shown some flashes at times, but I think overall it doesn't matter. I think Keion White is going to take a huge step forward. A guy who probably people don't know, but I think that going next year, I think he may not get 10 plus sacks. I don't think maybe he'll get that, but I think that he's gonna take that next jump, right? I don't think my guy has to be a guy who's all of a sudden going to be a league winner by any means, but I think he becomes way more relevant after this year.
Yeah, this guy's interesting. I mean, you were, excited about him as a rookie, and I was, okay, and kind of tried to temper your excitement a little bit. But now that, Barmore is injured and unfortunately he's dealing with those blood clots, definitely don't want to see that. But since then, though, I feel like Keion White's really burst onto the scene, and you're just, like you said, people are raving about him out of training camp and just seeing what he's been able to do. Definitely a player that I've grown more and gotten excited for here as we get closer to the season.
All right, Joe, who is your final IDP My Guy for the 2024 season?
Yeah, my final guy is going to be edge rusher Yaya Diaby, and if you've listened to tuned into our podcast or show before, you've definitely heard me talk about this guy. He was one of my breakout picks, and I still believe, he had 7.5 sacks last year. Still think he's got a chance to get the double-digit sacks this year and take that next step forward. I know you were concerned about the ankle injury, Steve. He has been back at practice. Everyone says he's looking good. Looks like he's going to be ready to go for week 1. And, they've got some young players amongst this defensive line. Shaq Barrett's no longer there. To me, he is the guy in terms of edge rushers right now on this defense.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly a good story, or not a story, but it's a reminder. And what I mean by that is our injuries important? Yes, they are, and you have to take into account that Yaya Diaby is injured. But at the same time, you don't want to overvalue that, because if you're going to completely fade this guy, I think it's a mistake, because, like you said, he is ripe for a huge breakout this year. And so, yes, he dealt with the ankle injury, but we don't really know how significant it is. And it's not like this guy is really being drafted that high. So to me, even regardless of what's going on with the ankle injury, you'd be silly not to get this guy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having a young guy like, Kalijah Cansey up on the defensive front, they've, got good linebacker play, solid secondary as well. So I think everything, like you said, is there for him to get those double-digit sacks and really take that next step.
So my final IDP My Guy is a guy who I'd say has been quite well, but he hasn't really, I think, taken that elite step, and I think he finally does. That's edge rusher Brian Burns, formerly of the Carolina Panthers. He was traded to the New York Giants, and he had a disappointing season last year. People were expecting big things from him. I think he definitely it was his time to go. I think he, from what everything that we could tell based on reports, he was always seemed to be fighting with the front office in Carolina. But he had 8 sacks last year. But overall, I mean, he's had 12 and a half the year before that, 9 the year before that, 9 the year before that, and then his rookie year he had 7.5. The guy's been productive basically every year, even though he was somewhat of a disappointment. But he's never been in a defensive line this talented. He's got Kayvon Thibodeau on the opposite side. He's got Dexter Lawrence in the middle, clogging up the middle. So I think Brian Burns has a real potential. I would not be surprised if he's getting, I think he'd get 13, 14 sacks. I think he could do really well. And I think he could get a ton of pressures. It's not all about the sacks. So I think that Brian Burns, I'm gonna roll with him over Thibodeau. I like Thibodeau. Thibodeau, I think, can have some flashes, but I think Burns is the more consistent guy, and I really like Burns this year.
Yeah, I think Thibodeau is going to help, kind of let Burns be the beneficiary there. I'm not, you've been listening as well. I'm not the biggest Thibodeau guy. He's a feast or famine. 1 week against a bad matchup, he'll get you a bunch of sacks. Other times he kind of fades away. And I question his work ethic and everything like that. Maybe having a guy like Brian Burns there will help him. But I feel like people are forgetting about how good Brian Burns has been for the Panthers. It was disappointing last year, but I think there's a chance we see Brian Burns return to form. And like you mentioned, he hasn't played on amongst the defensive line with this much talent like the Giants do have. I just hope the Giants offense can get some leads to help make it even easier for him to, get to the quarterback.
Well, I was going to say, not to mention, I think he'll be on the field quite a bit. I mean, I think that Giants offense is pretty anemic. So that could mean that he has even more opportunities to get tackles. Now, he could be fatigued because he's on the he's playing a
Yeah.
lot of snaps. But I mean, having a lot of snaps is going to be, I think, it could be helpful for him as long as he can stay, as long as he can stay. What's the word I'm looking for?
Healthy.
Healthy, perfect. No, that's not healthy. He's got the juice,
Or
right?
have
He doesn't get
the
tired.
stamina in order
Yeah,
to
stamina.
withstand
That's
all
it.
those extremes.
There it is. Stamina. That's not a word I typically use.
Yeah. But that's a little bit of my concerns though, because it's easier to quote unquote turn the dogs loose when you got a lead and you can play more aggressive and play downhill and go after the quarterback than it is when you're, constantly playing from behind or trying to play catch-up ball.
I don't think I've heard that one before. Turn the dogs loose.
No, you never heard of that?
Yeah, they must be feisty dogs. You don't want those dogs to be around you.
Yeah, well, hey, you want dogs on your IDP team, and I think Burns could definitely be one of those dogs.
There you go. So that does it for our IDP My Guys for the 2024 fantasy football season. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and check out our most recent episode where we talked about our My Guys for the offensive players. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.